SnowTrax is sponsored by Ski-Doo, Polaris Terrain Domination, and by FXR Racing, Full Throttle Addiction.
Get her out of the shop. Go reverse on these modern units, you know? Can't do that with the new ones. I guess we're just waiting for AJ to get some iron fired up. Yours have been in heated, right? So they're probably a lot happier. These things have been in -20 for the past week. They're just not running good. So last season, we kind of embarked on a new adventure between us, the crew at SnowTrax. We embarked back in time, right? Took a trip back in time in the snowmobile world and picked up some old iron. And we thought it might be interesting to sit down and kind of explain the story behind why and how we did that and what we ended up doing with it, where it all ended up for this season. The whip was the originator, and it was from the wobble ride in Waconia. That's right. And Luke went down, he found it with $500 and he got the matching suit to go with it. And that was sort of, I think, the catalyst to all of us going out and jumping into this vintage sort of epic. We kind of got the bug after riding the whip. Every person who rode the whip here at the office, including you, said, man, I can't believe how great that sled runs, right? Like, it runs so good. And I think everybody in the back of their mind was thinking, what if we got some more of these things? But nobody actually wanted to say it, right? What if we got some more of these? And what if all vintage sleds run like this?
Well, that was a huge mistake on everyone's part to assume that they all run like that, because the whip it's the standout of the whole fleet. I mean, it runs like a 2015 sled.
Well, then our buddy Kyle showed up with his Evinrude, right? And he comes to the office one day and says, check out what I bought for $400. We're all looking at it like, what did you buy, man? And it ran like a top too. And I mean, he beat on that thing out in the woods and
but it
never
was ugly.
gave up. It was ugly. Kind of part of its charm.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's what really kind of restarted. Once we saw somebody else do it, we pulled the whip out. When you went and picked up your 2 Ski-Doos, you got some crazy gear on the Ski-Doos. I ended up going and adding the Snowjet to the fleet.
And I refused to buy one. Actually, I still am in the market, but I want a perfect 78 Enticer 250, and my standards are too high.
Keep looking. Yeah. But what we learned real quick, right? I mean, the first thing everybody does these days once they get something they love and they want to share with people is you start a Facebook page, and that's just the thing to do. So we came up with, of course, leaf spring bangers, and that was kind of a thing between you and me and Kyle. We came up with that name, and it took off. And what do we have?
Over 3,000 people who join in the craziness and the mayhem, and
in only a few months.
Exactly, yeah.
It was nuts, and it's all like guys like our age, you know, with old citations and junk that they've been doing what we are doing now, hitting snowbanks and jumping stuff. They've been doing it for a while.
They've been banging.
Banging.
That's what it is, man.
So for people who are around my age, this whole phenomena is kind of weird, because for you guys, these things are something really unusual, different, you know, new. They're not new. But for us, this is what we did. I mean, we went out on 35 years ago today in the wintertime, we would be out and riding 75 or 100 miles on these sleds. And you guys think if the pull rope, you know, works and doesn't pull out of it and it'll fire up and go and you can take a lap around the lake and jump it off a cliff or something, that's really cool.
Doing what we do, and we've done for many years, we grew up riding new stuff. It was always new. The consequences to riding 120, 130, 150 horsepower snowmobiles when you screw up, it can be pretty big. Yeah, problems get big fast. So this, you know.
30 horsepower, extremely terrible friction and loss of horsepower due to that friction, and like suspension that is almost non-existent, pretty much means that you're not going to get yourself in too much trouble.
We're learning about what these sleds were and how they developed and where we got today, thanks to sleds like these And it's neat to kind of go back and then start from the beginning and roll your way back up.
I think it gives you a much better appreciation for technology, where we are today and where we've come from. Because you look at this and you go, I can hands-on fix this, manipulate it, time it, change it, adjust it, clean it, put it back together and make it run. On a sled nowadays, you can't physically do that. You can't pull anything off and fix anything. You have to take a piece out and repair it and replace it with a brand new electronic piece.
One of the things that I think as being your dad that's been the most fun for me is to watch you guys and to watch you try and figure out stuff. And then you let me come over and I feel like a genius when I point at stuff because it was old school to me. So when I tell you how to get the things running, it's kind of fun and kind of rewarding to talk these things through. And you're right. I mean, the sophistication of the new snowmobiles doesn't allow you to really experience hardly anything mechanical. I mean, what do we talk about? How you set up the compression dampening on your shocks. These things, if you want to live out there, you had to know how to make them run or you wouldn't get home.
SnowTrax is sponsored by snowmobileandquebec.com. This winter, experience snowmobile heaven.
So our reference point for vintage snowmobiles, I think, is actually pretty good. I mean, we don't just have 2 or 3 sleds. I think at one point we were up to almost 10 total, and from about 4 or 5 different manufacturers. So I think we've got a pretty good scope of understanding of vintage sleds. And along with that understanding has come the understanding of how these things work, how to repair them,
How they don't work.
and sometimes how frustrating it can be to try to get them to work. Like today with me, I was 3 for 3, didn't want to run properly. So, you know, there's some of that
But
time
they
where
ran.
they all
did
ran.
run.
They just didn't run
Just not
well.
today. Well, I mean, it's just part of the game, right? When you're buying these sleds, when you're buying them, you know, there's sleds that look great and don't run and probably are never going to run, and there's sleds that look like junk and run like tops.
I think one of the things that you guys don't understand because you weren't there is that 70s period you're talking about where you own sleds and where all these sleds are boxed together is a very, very important period in the history of snowmobile development, because that sled, that Scorpion Whip, has a CDI ignition on it, but that Skidoo you've got, the 72, has point ignition, and there is like a huge difference in those days. I mean, everybody was running around like, you know, you got to get CD ignition. Well, now, you know, chainsaws have CD ignition.
I think it's neat to have that wide variety from not just a technical standpoint, but from a look standpoint. These things look weird, you know, they're so bizarre.
I think the ones that are the most intriguing too, and probably the most unreliable and the hardest to fix, are the ones that are dead and gone. I mean, like this thing and that. Those iconic names of the 70s that just disappeared, some of those are really, really hard to fix. And it's hard now to get people to even know them and know how to fix them or what's really wrong with them. Whereas, you know, Yamahas and Skidoos and Arctics and Polarises, there's lots of information and you can still get stuff for them. And this is a genre now. I mean, it's established. It's becoming very, very popular. One thing that I know for sure, I've known this my whole life participating in this sport, this is a disease. When you catch it, you can catch it on that whip or on this old Skidoo or on this Snowjet, you can catch it, and once you got it, you want to play around with these things and you'll ultimately end up buying a newer and better snowmobile. So probably there's some people coming into the sport who haven't owned a new sled and are doing it this way and having a blast.
When you're ripping down the trail on a sled like this with blue smoke flying behind you and you're doing about 30, but it sounds like you're doing 100 with a crazy helmet on, and you look serious, people it's like they don't know what to think. People on their real sleds are like, what is going on?
You can't get more people to stare at you than if you pulled up stark naked on a snowmobile.
No,
when you
it's
ride
true.
up on one of these things, it's like people are really, really intrigued.
The bottom line of it all for guys like us is that these aren't going to replace the new stuff. And I don't think anybody's ever going to go out and say, you know what, I'm done with new sleds, I'm riding vintage from now on. That's crazy talk. Nobody's going to do that. But I think that there's a real place for this kind of equipment in everybody's garage for those days when, you know, it's just, you just want to blow off some steam with no consequences and just not worry.
The most captioning of SnowTrax is sponsored by Triton Trailers, the cornerstone of every adventure.
I'm placing my bets that now you're hooked on vintage just like we are. So AJ and I thought it would be helpful to give you an idea of what you should look for and look out for before you drop your change on a new ride.
So we thought we'd show you some of our own vintage iron, share with you how we acquired it, how much we paid for it, and all of the things we experienced along the way, both good and bad. My 1976 Skidoo TNT 340 is an example of the very best that you can get in vintage sleds, both in condition and price. This sled is in nearly brand new showroom condition and cost me only 600 bucks. So when I'm looking for a vintage sled, I typically try to look for something that's a little unique. Is this unique? Absolutely not.
No.
And for the most part, you are not going to find a unique Skidoo because there is so many of them out there. At the same time, you're going to be able to have a much broader selection if you want a cleaner, nicer looking sled that parts are available for.
If you don't want a sled that you're going to have to hunt for parts, a Skidoo's your best choice.
It didn't run when I bought it, but it didn't take much. I went to town, bought a new set of plugs, and it fired up. So that's literally all this sled needed. That's my Skidoo TNT 340. It's not very unique, but it does run great. I think it's a keeper. This is a keeper.
Some of you may recognize my whip from an episode of SnowTrax a few years ago. I bought it at Heydays in Minnesota for 600 bucks. It started on the first pull when I bought it, and it started first pull every time since. Another example of an outstanding vintage find. This whip was the first vintage sled that had ever been brought around the SnowTrax World headquarters, and so far it's been the most reliable. It does have one unique feature that's interesting though. This sled has what's called a para-rail suspension, which is kind of a cross between bogies and slide rails. It's like slide rails with bogie wheels all the way along them, and it was before anybody had thought of slide rails, that was the first idea. In terms of vintage sleds, this is a great example of a survivor sled that's unrestored and runs just like the day it was built, maybe even better. And if you can find one like this, buy it.
My 74 Arctic Cat Lynx 2 is a prime example of what a crazy deal looks like. I only had to cough up 200 bucks and an old used Camoplast track that was lying around for it. It isn't perfect, it's taken some work, and it still doesn't run quite right, but you know what? For the money and the trade, it's a pretty good deal. This sled was a little bit of a splurge. I was sitting in the office one day, I was on the internet, and I found it within 30 minutes of the office. It was too good of a deal, I had to go get it. And I think part of us here at SnowTrax really wanted to have an Arctic Cat. A guy like Roger Skine, who actually had his hands on the production and design of this snowmobile, that means something to us. At the end of the day though, there's some problems with this sled and problems that you should look out for. Number one, steel gas tanks. Be very cautious of steel gas tanks because they are all rusted inside. Besides that, you know what? It's in good shape. Always look for the track and the condition of that track because they're hard to get, they're a pain in the butt to change, and they're expensive.
The moment I laid eyes on a Snowjet SST, I knew I had to have one. They're very hard to find in our area, at least to find in good shape. This one had been sitting in a shed for about 20 years and, aside from some tarnished chrome and gunk buildup under the hood, it was in excellent shape. I paid 550 bucks for it, which was probably a little high, but it's definitely one of the more unique sleds we have in our fleet. I have a thing for this Snowjet. I don't really know why, I just love it. It doesn't really run that good. It'll go wide open, but it won't idle. It needed a lot of work when I got it. It's a great example of a sled that looked better than it really was inside. Like really it did. But at the end of the day, I wanted this sled, so there's a lesson to be learned here. If you have to have a specific sled, that's fine. But you better be prepared to either pay more than you should for it because it's emotionally attached, or do more work to the ones you can find.
When it all boils down, at the end of all of this, we're not vintage collectors. We like to ride the stuff that we buy. We like to go out and beat on it. We like to bang the sleds. That's why we're the Leaf Spring Bangers. And you need to check us out online, join our Facebook page, and come see what we do with this stuff. And hopefully it gets you as amped up as we are on vintage because we just have a flippin' blast doing this stuff. It's so much fun. Come on and join us.
Test Ride is sponsored by Princess Auto, the unique world of equipment, tools, and more.
Every power sports activity has to have the biggest, the baddest, the most powerful, the fastest vehicle. Our sport, snowmobiling, is no different. On this week's Test Ride segment, we're going to talk about the literally incomparable 177 horsepower Arctic Cat ZR 9000 Turbo. If you're one of those individuals who must have the fastest, the most powerful, and the most exclusive sled when you roll into Larry's Burger Pit, the Arctic Cat Turbo is likely high on your list of preferred rides. Simply put, in our hands-on testing, there is nothing in the industry capable of stretching your forearms when the loud handle is squeezed, quite like the 9000 Turbo. The engine is crazy powerful, producing an accelerative surge at 50 miles per hour, like most 800s do at 20 miles per hour. An interesting fact about the Arctic Cat ZR 9000 Turbo and all other Arctic Cat models using this power package is their owner's predisposition to modify them. Simply put, there are more bolt-on tweaks available that deliver solid, no. Impressive, no. Crazy power improvements for the 9000 Turbo than for all other modern sleds combined. The 1100cc turbocharged double overhead cam twin in the ZR 9000 has been around for a while. It first appeared in the gone and mostly forgotten F-Series twin spar chassis. Arctic Cat wisely moved the turbo into the new, lighter, and more sophisticated Procross platform 3 model years ago. The improvement in handling and ride was immediate. However, some issues lingered, not the least of which was drive belt reliability. Reliably transferring the power the Z1100 Turbo produces can be both complicated and difficult at the same time. The threshold for reliably transferring power with a CVT in a snowmobile has been, give or take, around the 150 horsepower level. Beyond that, CVT reliability is diminished and belt life becomes elusive. So last year, Arctic Cat made material changes to the Procross and Proclimb chassis under-hood air management, adding cold air intakes in the left front fender and changing the design of the secondary clutch, making it shed heat more effectively. The result was an exponential improvement in belt life, resulting from a dramatic decrease in underhood temperatures. For 2015, Arctic Cat went even further with a brand new multi-vented left front fender package, which ensures that underhood temperatures not exceed 160°F, the magic temperature for belt durability. We have found this package to be so effective, it's like Arctic Cat mounted an air conditioner under the hood. Even the bodywork stays cool to the touch. Beyond all the talk about industry-leading power, there's more at play in the 2015 ZR 9000. The Procross chassis has been getting better every year since its inception in 2012. This year, a new softer shock valve package for the innovative slide-action skid makes a dramatic improvement in overall ride quality. Arctic's slide-action front arm has always delivered superb response in jigglers. It now produces a vastly more supple and compliant ride in medium and large bumps. Let's be honest, there is a downside to packing 177 stallions under this hood. The downside? Weight. There's no doubt the Z1100 Turbo engine package is among the heftiest in the snowmo biz. The big question is, will you feel the extra weight of this formidable engine? The answer? Yes and no. For sure, the ZR 9000 is not happy being thrown around in ditches. Its heavy front end makes the sled a handful when terrain is rough. Ride quality is actually very good in big bumps. However, the inertia of this much weight becomes fatiguing when ditch banging. Can it be ridden in ditches? Sure. However, for our money, we would opt for the lighter ZR 8000 with its impressively powerful and much lighter 800cc two-stroke twin. And no, you won't feel the extra weight of the ZR 9000 on groomed trails and lakes. In fact, one of our test riders commented that when the ZR 9000 feels a bit heavy in the front end, you just wick the throttle up and it will literally loft the skis over trail garbage. There's a split personality thing going on with the ZR Turbo. Here's what we mean. Inasmuch as the power here is mostly incomparable, You can actually ride this sled all day on trails and never come face to face with the beast lurking under the hood. In fact, I let my wife try a turbo and she was pleasantly impressed with its linear, predictable power delivery and even throttle response. However, one must use this throttle judiciously, because if you don't and you're not prepared, things can go sideways very quickly. Essentially, here is what the ZR9000 is all about. Excess. Trust me, there is more than enough power here to keep any throttle jockey giggling. And if the need should arise for more power, simply whip out your Visa card and buy a boost controller, which can capably increase the output of the ZR9000 well past 200 horsepower. So here's my final thought on the ZR9000. Nothing exceeds like excess.
SnowTrax has been sponsored by Polaris Terrain Domination, Arctic Cat, share our passion, and by Go Ride Ontario, yours to discover.
If you liked this video, post a comment and tell us what you think. Then click on this link to subscribe to SnowTrax TV here on the YouTube channel.